Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I want to welcome you all today to our Everything MSP webinar with our good friends at Sophos. We're going to talk about the Active Adversary Playbook 2022. And I have Steve Weber here with Sophos, as well as Karen Garino. Did I say that right?
You did great.
We were just talking about last names, because like Tomaszewski is kind of a tough one, right? I hear everything from ride a jet ski to, oh gosh, I mean, so many pronunciations, it's unbelievable. But so I should be the last one, to have any difficulty with anybody's name, but it happens. So welcome, everybody. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have a great event lined up. And we also have some cool, very cool Sophos swag that will be given away here at the end. And there is a little bit of a thing that's going to, prompt you to be entered or help you to be that winner. We're looking for some engagement. So if you want to help out by asking questions or throwing in some comments in the chat or Q&A, that would be great. So we'll be doing that right at the end. And if you do have any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask them. We'll try to answer them as quick as we can. And we'll also have some additional Q&A time at the end as well. So what I'd like to do is start out. We'll do ladies first. Karen, if you'd like to do an introduction of yourself, that would be awesome.
Hey, everybody. I am Karen Guarino. I'm a channel account executive for the Americas. And I've been with Sophos for just 18 years last week.
Congratulations. That's a long time.
Yeah. Well, I came over from Reflection. So there's a little buy-in from Reflection time. But been in for 18 years now.
I remember the good old days of seeing you and Scott Barlow at conferences and getting the back scratchers that you guys probably still have some of them in the garage, right?
I actually have one right here.
That's awesome.
Oh no, maybe not. Maybe it's moved.
Those are the infamous swag gear from. I want to say one of the first. There we go. Check that out.
This was our office sign, and when you walked in our office.
So much has changed. It's probably back when I met you guys was one of their first exchange conferences. And you had a plethora of back scratchers. So that's cool.
that was our hand giveaway. We've had many of different giveaways, from hand sanitizers to carabiners, and the back scratches seem to have the most lag time with memory.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Karen, welcome. Thank you for being here. And we also have Steve Weber. Steve, if you'd like to give an introduction of yourself, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve Weber, I'm the Global Solutions Engineer here at Sophos, covering just the MSP program. I've been with Sophos now for coming up on 7 years. Prior to that, I was actually an MSP. I owned my own business here with a group of friends and partners. So I've been in this space. I've dealt with it. I've been through the gamut of the ConnectWises, the Kaseyas, Enables. Yeah, I've dealt with it all at this point.
Very cool. And for those that haven't met me yet, I am Dan Tomaszewski. I'm president of Everything MSP. I'm also owner of an MSP, Greenlight Business Technology, based here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I've been in the industry for 20 years now. So as you can tell with the little bit of hair I have left here, I have no hair left. It's gone. That's a true sign of a MSP owner, right, Steve?
Absolutely. I'm holding on to a little, but not much.
Yeah. My wife told me many years ago just to quit clinging onto it. So I just shave it off. So it's gone. But so we are here to talk about security. Security is obviously a hot topic that's never going to go away. I mean, I remember many years ago when we talk about, what's the hot topic at this conference or that conference, and it would be this or that, and then all of a sudden security just became like the hot topic at every conference, and it's always the hot topic, and that's why we're here today, to talk more about security and ways that we can assist our clients to protect them and do the things that they count on us for when it comes to keeping their business safe and secure. So let's kick it off. Let's talk a bit more about the Active Adversary playbook and what you guys have done to put this together and why you felt it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go ahead and jump right in. So the Active Adversary playbook is something we put together. I think this is either the second or third year that it has been out. And it's meant to be together to put together the tools, the main adversaries that are out there, the attack behaviors, and things that we are seeing from the past year. And this is all from the frontline incident responders at Sophos that assist with these attacks out in the wild. This one that we're talking about today actually follows our Active Adversary playbook from 2021 and just shows how the threat landscape continues to evolve. The aim of this is to really help security teams understand what the adversaries are doing during these attacks, how to spot them, how to defend against them on their networks. These findings inside of here, again, these are all from our Sophos rapid response team. Findings inside of here, again, these are all from our Sophos rapid response. I can hear myself.
Oops, sorry about that, guys. That was me monitoring Facebook. All of a sudden,
I'm on there. It's good.
There were two Steves there all of a sudden. So sorry about that. Carry on.
That's all good. Keeps it light. So what we want to do is first take a look at the demographics of the incident responses from the last year. And the report is based on 144 incidents targeting organizations of all sizes across a wide range of sectors. The targets were based in 17 different countries across the globe. Of that, 60% of those victims were here in the US, 25% over in Europe. If we break that number down into the small and medium businesses, we're seeing about 58% of those were attacked against a small or medium business. The sectors that we are seeing most represented here are going to be manufacturing, followed by retail, healthcare, IT, and construction. So you can kind of see the trends of where these attacks are happening, the types of organizations by size, and then the type of organization by the sector that they actually work in. So let's start taking a look at the key findings and then dive into them in a little more depth. We've got 8 key numbers here in the anatomy of these attacks for 2021. The first being the length of time that an intruder spent in the network. This is also known as dwell time. What we see here is that there is an increase from 2020 to 2021 from a median average of 11 days into 15 days. Essentially, attackers are spending more than a third of the time in a victim's environment, scoping it out, looking, trying to figure out how the network is laid out, where the data is, and what defenses are actually being used in that environment. If we take that same finding and we remove ransomware from the equation, we can see that that dwell time goes up to 34 days. So the dwell time is typically lower in a ransomware attack, as often we see these attackers are wanting to get to the money-making part of that attack quicker. On average, we're seeing about 4.2 days between data exfiltration and ransomware deployment. Typically, again, if we're talking how this works inside of an environment, the bad guy will first go in and attempt to remove the data from the environment. This gives them an extra tool to exert leverage over the victim before they actually move on to the ransomware stage.
I just wanted to throw one thing out here, Steve. I think for most clients out there, they don't really think about the length of time that an attacker is there. I think they view it as more of a one and done. They've come in, they've done something, and boom, they're gone. And they don't really think about the fact that there could be active activity prior to, even afterwards. So I think that's one of the things that is probably a bit shocking and maybe even quite a bit scary for most clients to think about the fact that there could be someone actively architecting what they're going to do and how they're going to attack.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth on that as well, because there's actually a growing trend with this longer dwell time that we're seeing. So yeah, good point. All right, so moving along here, in almost half of the attacks that we've seen out there, these attacks started with an exploited vulnerability. This was the #1 way in which attackers were able to get into an environment. Once in an environment, we saw that 82% of the time they utilized RDP for internal movement. This is up from last year in 2020. Essentially, the bad guys are using legitimate tools to move around a customer's network. 73% of the incidents that we investigated involved ransomware. And if we take a look at that, that coincides what our reports find from the state of ransomware in 2022 as well, which revealed about 66% of the organizations had reported being hit by ransomware in the last year. This is actually a huge leap from what we saw in the previous report in our state of ransomware 2021, which is about 37% of organizations reported being hit by ransomware. Staying with that ransomware theme on there, Conti was one of the biggest and most prevalent adversary groups that we encountered during 2021, taking up about 18% of all of the incidents that we investigated. And then again, no surprise here when we're seeing the gap between the exfiltration and the ransomware deployment. Data exfiltration is definitely on the rise. In 38% of the incidents, we saw that there was some sort of either data exfiltration or a staged data set waiting to be moved off of the network. So before we dive into these numbers a little bit deeper, we want to go ahead and just take a look at the macro threat environment that we had from the last year. And two of the most influential cyber threat developments occurred in March and August of 2021 with the reporting of proxy logon and proxy shell for Microsoft Exchange servers. As noted by CISA and other government agencies, proxy logon, proxy shell bugs have been extensively exploited by adversaries. So it's no surprise that they were part of a significant number of the attacks during 2020. There are also likely to be more proxy shell, proxy logon breaches that are still unknown. There are backdoors that have not been closed. And this goes along and starts talking about the dwell time and the intrusion into these networks. And this actually led to another major development that we started to see in last year, which was the growing influence of these initial access brokers. The initial access broker's success depends on being first into a breach. They want to get in and achieve access to that victim before there's any widespread patching done. Their aim is to get a foothold, implant backdoors, and possibly do some exploratory movement around the network to get a sense of the value of that asset before selling it to other adversaries, such as ransomware operators. This type of an attack is going to be growing. And in most cases, we're seeing a lot of a professionalization around these initial access brokers, much the same as we see with the thriving ransomware as a service business. Last but not least, there is forensic evidence that we're uncovering in most of these attacks that reveal multiple adversaries, including these initial access brokers, ransomware gangs, crypto miners, and occasionally even multiple ransomware operators targeting the same organization simultaneously. Again, this is likely to continue and will shape how we see the landscape here in 2022. The length of time that these intruders are spending is also likely due to the fact that you have these initial access brokers that are in there for the long haul. They also have malware delivery systems, botnets, dropper platforms that go into these systems and allow them to have that remote access. All right, so let's take a look at the intruders and start diving into these numbers a little bit here. So we've seen the headlines, we've seen what's happening. We know proxy shell, proxy logon were two of the largest things seen in the environment. When we go in and we start to take a look at that dwell time in there, again, incidents involving ransomware was about 11 days dwell time inside of an environment. This is actually down from 2020, where we saw about 18 different. If we, again, remove ransomware from that, we see that that goes up quite a bit to 34 days. There was also considerable variation by the different sectors. If you take a look at healthcare, for instance, it's roughly about 8.5 days dwell time in their environments, whereas education, you see 34 days, so just roughly around about a month. These longer dwell times often reflect the involvement of these initial access brokers and also reflect how hard it can be for these internal security staff to hunt, investigate, and respond to the suspicious alerts and activity from these initial access brokers. Similarly, if we take a look at the dwell time relative to company size, the average dwell time for these small businesses 1 to 100 was just about 52 days, so almost a month and a half, whereas organizations over 3,000 employees were 20 days or less. Again, this is important because the longer an adversary is inside of the environment, the more exploring they can do, the more that they can install, the more backdoors, the more data they can potentially steal from the environment. Again, it's clear that it takes longer for a smaller company to understand where their vulnerabilities are and remove these attackers from their environments. And if you do not have the resources to spot these intruders in-house quickly, it is worth noting you should partner with somebody who can do proactive threat hunting, looking for suspicious behaviors, tools, and techniques. That way they can investigate those and respond to them before it becomes an actual ransomware attack.
This data is really rather alarming. And I think, as security professionals, we should have a good understanding of that. But I think for our clients now, while we don't want to sell on fear, I think it's important to educate them about what that process looks like, because I think it really opens the eyes of the client to help them to understand how critical proper security management is. Because, to think about that, you're just sitting there, you're working on your business, you're sending emails out, you're putting together proposals, and someone is there. Someone could be there and looking at ways in which they can perform their attack, capture your data. And, we talk about Big Brother, big security hacker brother. It makes it more scary, and it helps just to put it into perspective for the client of how critical it is that while you're sitting there doing your work, you need that level of protection. And if you don't, it's just a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's definitely, security is no longer a secondary talk at the table as it used to be, as you're stating in the past. It needs to be first and foremost. What are we doing to secure the environment? And we can definitely see that here. And part of the root cause of these attacks, which we're going to see, this is often, how did they get into the environment? And this is important because we want to know where the weaknesses are in our defenses. That way we can go through and shore those up inside of the environment.
Right.
And amongst those attacks, again, from the last year, the exploitation of those unpatched vulnerabilities, that was huge. Proxy logon, proxy shell opened the door for these cyber threats in 2021. There's going to be no end to that. If we take a look, Microsoft, other vendors, there's always going to be vulnerabilities. If somebody's writing a piece of software, chances are there's going to be a vulnerability in there. And if there's one thing to learn right from this, the fact that 47% of what we saw out there from 2021 was exploited vulnerabilities, it's patch your systems, make sure everything is patched in a timely manner. There's really no excuse to leave that front door open for an attacker. And quite honestly, if you haven't patched in a timely manner, have somebody go in and do a deep dive and make sure there are no backdoors, make sure nothing has been installed in those networks. It's also worth noting on here, another big one is phishing accounted for about 8% of the root causes that we saw in there. So it's about 1 in 10. So the user education, I know that number seems small, and that's great that it's not higher, but that means it is very important for us to keep on user education and awareness, making sure that these phishing training assessments and tests are done inside of these environments. So switching over to the main types of attacks that we saw. So we look at the root cause of how they got into the environment, and these would be the main types of attacks that we saw, once they were in. And with no surprise here, with the release of ransomware, this is often the time in which an IT professional or a company becomes aware of an attack inside of their environment. Again, it's very hard to go in and take a look for all of the different intruders that may be in there, may be moving around. And again, this is typically where we will see that we're brought into this. And of those, 73% of the cases that we saw involved ransomware. In the case of data exfiltration, Karen, did you have a question?
Yeah, there's 2 questions that just popped up about Pegasus. And if Sophos could protect against Pegasus and also malicious Wi-Fi hotspots.
So I am not 100% familiar with Pegasus, but yes, any new ransomware out there, we have a labs office as well as an AI office and our threat hunting team that are global, and they are constantly bringing data in from all of those threats and then ensuring that all of our protections, not just the signature-based, but also our behavioral-based ransomware protections are up to date to catch all of those attacks. For the most part, with our CryptoGuard technology with ransomware, we look at the behavior, not the type, not the Pegasus, not all the different flavors that are out there, Revil. We look at the behavior, the rapid encryption of files on a system, and that's how we go in to detect it from that point. So oftentimes, even a 0-day we've never seen, we can actually account for that as well.
I hope that answers your question. Sorry, and you can carry on, Steve.
And no worries. So yeah, data exfiltration in here accounted for about 1% of the actual incidents. As we were looking at this means we got brought in early in most cases, and the incident responders were looking at this unfold into the environment. And from what they were seeing, most of the times, this often would have led into a ransomware attack if it was not caught in time. The second most prevalent one on here, which you see, is other intrusions, which accounted for about 23%. For the purpose of this report, they defined this as anything that was not ransomware or any of the other tracked metrics. This is often an intrusion which came from the proxy logon, proxy shell, but could also be misuse of remote access, insecure VPNs, stolen account credentials, and even just security oversights by an IT team, leaving entry points open to the internet. One of the key findings in these intrusions is being able to get in and neutralize them before the malicious payload is actually delivered to a target. And in a lot of these cases, in the case of those 23 intrusions on there, it is reasonable to assume that a lot of these intrusions could possibly have belonged to these initial access brokers, and that they were sitting there as a banked resource that had yet to be sold to an adversary. So even though we see the intrusion, we're able to kick the bad guys out. That is potential that they are inside of the environment, and that could potentially be sold for access to not just one, but again, multiple adversaries. Crypto miners were present in about 2% of the attacks that we investigated out there. And while the presence of a malicious crypto miner is detected by the system impact, the performance, the illicit coin mining takes effect on the toll of the processor of the device, a lot of this, it could be very tempting for an IT admin to just write that off as a, hey, there's a crypto miner, let's go and remove it. It's a low-level nuisance threat, nothing that could be majorly malicious. But in fact, their presence on your network proves that there is a vulnerable entry point for an attacker to get in. So, and they can also be the harbinger for something more serious down the line. The last one to take a look on is just droppers, malware delivery systems. These are designed to deliver, load, and install malicious payloads on a target systems. This could be, again, providing botnet access. It could be backdoor access on there. If you see these sorts of malicious components on there, this is oftentimes, a precursor to something more serious, again, such as a ransomware attack inside of the environment.
All right, Steve, since you're pausing, I'm going to take this opportunity.
Me too. I took an opportunity to take a drink.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hopefully it's a beer.
Right. Warm beer.
Warm beer. An Oberon. That's my favorite.
There
We
you
don't
go.
get that in Boston. So is there any relation between these attacks and denial of service attacks?
Not from what we're seeing. Denial of service is definitely, it's a different type of an attack. Denial of service is set to prevent somebody from getting to you. Oftentimes, a denial of service will be set to a service. So Sophos, for instance, we provide a service to our customers, and if those customers can't get to our Sophos Central dashboards, somebody was running a denial of service and we were not able to protect against that, it would mean that all of our customers and partners lose access to our tools. Whereas these intrusions are not really meant to deny the masses access to that software. Obviously, when we talk ransomware, there is a denial of access to your data, but that is usually specifically targeted at that company.
All right.
They're not mutually exclusive, but again, we typically don't see them together in this kind of playground.
And so I have somebody inquiring about possibly unknowingly about the Sophos acquisition and asking that they have MTR on several accounts that they have protected, and they would like to know if there's a date for integration with other hardware providers like Meraki or Cisco for forensic investigation.
I do not have dates that I can share, but yes, obviously with the purchase of Sophos, one of the biggest things there, and the reason we've acquired them, we've acquired Braintrace, was to bring in the ability to take data from other subsets, Meraki's and McAfee's and any other company that's out there, and bring that into the Sophos XDR and MTR environments to allow us to have better visibility across the board in your environment.
All right. And one last one on your break here. How does our solution prevent attacks for endpoints that aren't on the corporate network?
So, if we're talking our endpoint solution, that travels with you wherever you go. So it's always connected. Sophos Central is in the cloud. Our protections also work whether you are connected to the internet or not. You do not lose any protection other than maybe a second lookup against our Sophos Labs team when we're looking at the Sophos Central endpoint. Obviously, if we're talking you're leaving the perimeter, you've now left behind the firewall. So there is going to be a little bit of a risk there. I think somebody mentioned Wi-Fi networks. So yes, if you are joining an insecure Wi-Fi network, that is a very good possibility. We obviously always recommend VPNs back into the main office. Recommend a default gateway VPN. Send all your traffic across that secure tunnel. That way, if you are on an insecure Wi-Fi network where somebody could potentially be snooping in there, all that data from your endpoint over that Wi-Fi network, even out to the internet, goes through your main office.
And that's critical, in today's world, having that multi-layered approach to managing the security, just because we're living in a whole different world in the last 2 years with work from home, work from anywhere, and, very, very valid questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. No one's in a bubble anymore.
No.
Yeah. And as you guys can tell from, Karen and myself, Karen is at home and as am I. We've been doing this even well before the pandemic. We've always had a distributed workforce. So we have and implement all of these policies ourselves as well for, Sophos IT puts those policies on us and we have to adhere to all of them.
You eat your own dog food.
We absolutely do, yeah. All right, anything else before I move on?
That's it. So far, so good.
Okay. So before we move on to this one, I do want to just take a second here, because this really does come into the attack types, the dwell times and things we're seeing on there. When we were taking a look at this, the playground, the adversary playground has become very crowded. We see multiple adversaries in an individual target account at the same time. This could be, again, your initial access brokers, the ransomware gangs, crypto miners. And on this, it's not mutually exclusive. It's not just we're going to go in and the ransomware people are buying access to this. So even in the case of a crypto miner, where we saw this in just a very small percentage of the attacks, their presence can also coexist with ransomware and can also bring ransomware into an environment. So again, you've got to have IT and security be at the forefront of every single conversation. So let's take a look at the tools in which these adversaries are using during their attacks. And the first one that I want to bring up is RDP. RDP played a part in about 83% of the attacks. This is definitely an increase from 2020 that you guys can see here on screen. Internal use only, from what we're seeing on there, was 82%, whereas the external use was only seen in about 13% of the cases. This is particularly interesting because we think of RDP and you probably hear that and everybody's going, no, I've locked down RDP. But what happens is the attacker gets into the network, and while we may have gone in, and we can see here it's only 1% for external only access from all of those cases. We've locked down all of that. We've gone in, we've fought that battle against RDP on the external edge of our network. But when we take a look, once somebody's inside the network, RDP is still open and very accessible to these attackers. And they are using it to move laterally inside of the environment. Once they can gain access to one machine, once they can gain access to credentials, they can then move from that machine to another one, again, using legitimate tools inside of the environment. So really, this needs to be another key focus when we are talking about security. We're at 1%, which is down from last year for external only access seen in these attacks. So what this means is we're winning the battle for the external RDP, but the war for RDP is not over. You need to be proactive. You need to shut down these services on these devices if they are not in use. If they are in use, they need to be secured. This chart here shows the artifacts, including the tools, techniques, and services likely to be found in the attacker's tool set from what we were looking at in 2021. Many of these tools are used by IT professionals for benign purposes, but they're also very popular with adversaries. These allow them to conduct their activities such as credential stealing, discovery, lateral movement, malware execution, all while blending into the everyday IT activity workspace. This here, just showing of PowerShell inside of your PS exec, things you guys all absolutely use on a day-to-day basis, and other applications. If you have Dropbox on your system that uses PowerShell all the time. This highlights the challenge that defenders face when we're trying to differentiate between a malicious and legitimate activity on the network for PowerShell or PS exec. If we take a look at these tools and techniques and match these against the MITRE attack framework, what you can see in here is, again, initial access. You're going to have your exploits, remote access tools inside of there, privilege escalation, so Mimikatz and ProcDump, discovery, advanced IP scanner and NetScan, command and control with Cobalt Strike and PowerShell, exfiltration utilizing Rclone and WinRAR. These are all tools that an IT admin really needs to be familiar with. Defenders need to understand these tools, understand the techniques, and understand how they can be misused by an attacker. This will allow you to identify their presence on a network. And when you see it, be able to go in and investigate. Is this malicious activity or is this benign activity? One of the other particularly good examples of this when you are investigating this is certain tool combinations. So if the detection of a certain tool combination is seen, this can oftentimes be a good indicator that there is something that is about to happen on the network. It is a good early warning system for IT providers. Overall, 64% we see PowerShell and malicious scripts seen together, but we also have Cobalt Strike, PS exec heavily used in combination with PowerShell. So again, as you're doing your threat hunts, as you are doing your lookups on these networks, whether or not you're using XDR tools, whether or not you're using your RMM tools, if you are seeing this type of behavior and you're seeing it in conjunction with these other tools, this could be a precursor for something more malicious that's about to happen. Also, that there could be an active adversary or attack present inside of your network.
You mentioned you mentioned a couple slides ago that we're at war, and that's truly a great way to think about it, because we are at war against these bad actors, these hackers that are out there. And that's the mindset that, we as MSPs need to think through, because it's not something that we set and forget. It's an active, continuously active process and activity that we are, that we're faced with. And we just have to change that mindset that day in, day out, minute by minute, second by second, we are faced with threats and we have to combat them continuously.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best, and I don't remember who said this, so I can't quote them, but one of the best comments I've ever heard with cybersecurity is that it is not a spectator sport. We cannot just be sitting back and watching. This is not tennis, football, whatever. You are active. You are on the playing field. You need to be active in your security. And it unfortunately is not just a let's install a great endpoint solution. Let's install a good firewall. These things all have to be used in combination, and then they need to also have somebody looking at them. Even in our product, if you were to see that we blocked, let's say, an exploit happening inside of an environment, that's great. You see it, and we say, yes, we cleaned that. Somebody should now be asking the question, how did this get in? Where did that execute from? And they should know what caused that. Where was the root cause? We do a great job of showing you that particular attack, but did this span from anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's underestimated the amount of liability and the amount of responsibility that we as MSPs have, that we're faced with each day in protecting our clients. There was a point in time which we're, trying to keep a client from getting a virus. Now we're trying to keep a client from their business going down, from them going out of business. We are defending them day in, day out to keep their operations going and to ensure the sustainability of their operations.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's get in here and we'll start to wrap this up, and we'll get into some how can we actually not the doom and gloom and not the scary numbers on here, with the light at the end of the tunnel. So this one, again, I want to spend some moments on this data exfiltration. This is ever increasing. I can't even tell you, the time I've been with Sophos, this number just keeps going up and up and up. It used to be data exfiltration was just something that, occasionally would happen. And, again, now we're seeing this in roughly about 38% of all the incidents that we respond. In cases where data exfiltration took place, we do have evidence that suggests that the stolen information was subsequently leaked in those incidents about 46% of the time as well. So obviously, if you have sensitive data out there or you have company secrets, that is not good. So we want to prevent those bad guys from gaining access, getting a foothold into the environment. There's also a little bit of a window here. So generally, when we see this data exfiltration, and if, again, there are signs which you can go and look for, we'll talk about that in a minute. If you see this type of a data exfiltration, something happening in the environment, this is often a sign that ransomware is right around the corner. And we saw that with the mean average of about 4 days. If we look about the median gap on there from data exfiltration to the deployment of ransomware, we're in the neighborhood of around either from 4 days, 44 hours up to 4 days. So again, that gives us a window of opportunity for a defender to prevent that final and sometimes most damaging attack from unfolding inside of their network. And if the presence of these tools is seen, it should be investigated as a high priority. In terms of what tools that you should be looking for, and you can see some on screen here as well, rclone was the #1 tool that we found. It's a command line tool that connects to a wide variety of cloud storage providers, such as Mega. This was widely used in all of the cases that we saw in 2021, but it's not going to be limited to just those. Megasync, FileZilla, WinRAR, WinSCP, these are all tools that can be used to shift data from the environment. Blocking access to these types of tools, making sure that you have visibility if those are seen inside of the environment, you have reports that show, hey, this was used. And if it's not a tool that you're using inside of your environment, then again, that puts a red flag and that needs to be investigated with a high priority. If we take a look at the last component here, which is the ransomware adversaries. The main adversaries in 2021, and there were about 41 different adversaries that we were able to identify across the 144 incidents that we were analyzing. About 2/3 of those groups were brand new reported in 2021. About 18 of those adversary groups from the previous year had disappeared completely. Again, a clear indication of how crowded, dynamic, and complex the cyber threat landscape has become and how difficult it can be for defenders. The last year in many ways belonged to Conti, which they're a prolific ransomware as a service provider, accounting for about 18% of the incidents that were out there. Revil was also another big one, even though they had stopped operations in July of 2021. They had a resurgence again in September 2021 and again in 2022. Other most prevalent families that are seen out there from the last year were DarkSide, which is a ransomware as a service gang that was behind the notorious attacks for the Colonial pipelines here in the US. You also have Black Kingdom, which is a new ransomware family that appeared in March of 2021 in the wake of the proxy login vulnerability. All right, so let's get to the conclusion here. We're going to get away from the numbers. We're going to get away from the scary components on here. And let's talk kind of lessons learned. Essentially, every organization can potentially be a target for an adversary at some point, and this is increasing from more than just one. Phishing, fraud, botnet, malware delivery systems, crypto miners, these initial access brokers, this is all going to be there if we have vulnerable entry points into the network. And if there are these vulnerable entry points, chances are the attackers are looking for them and will eventually find them. Until those entry points have been closed and everything that the attacker has done to establish and retain a foothold inside of that network is eradicated, just about anybody can walk in right after them and probably will. Again, with those initial access brokers, they are selling access into the networks. This really goes down again, showing that security teams need to defend their organization by constantly monitoring and investigating the suspicious activity, knowing the difference between a benign use of a product versus a malicious, which is not always easy. Technology in any of these environments, whether physical or cyber, can do a great deal. We can help and we can assist with any of this, but human experience, skill, and the ability to respond are a vital part of any of these cybersecurity solutions. I just clicked the wrong button. There we go. So here's our top 6 takeaways from this. So ensure, the first one here, you have high quality defenses at all points in your environment. Try not to overlook anything. Endpoints, firewall at the border. If you are using cloud environments, make sure that you have monitoring and visibility into Azure, AWS, Google Clouds, your 365 accounts. Make sure that you have the ability or you're partnered with somebody that can hunt for these potential threats inside of your environment and investigate them. Again, this is knowing the difference between benign use of a program and malicious use. Harden your environment. This goes without saying, close down the security gaps, go and find those unpatched devices in the network, unprotected devices, close down RDP. The use of your RMMs and any XDR type tool is great for this purpose, of being able to find this information and then act on it. Number 4 here, prepare for the worst. Have an incident response plan in place. Know what you're going to do and who you are going to call if there is a breach, if there is a problem. Do not go running around at the last minute trying to figure out who you are going to call. Number 5 on here, backups. Backups, we all know, are very important. I think you've heard everybody harp on backups, but you need to practice restoring them. I guarantee you, most people are not doing this. I guarantee you, I was guilty of this as an MSP as well. It takes a lot of time, and then you have to convince the customer that we need to spend time to practice restoring their environment. If you know how to restore the environment, if it's been tested and it's been done just as if there is an actual outage or a breach inside of there, it can make that process go much smoother. Again, showing the customer that the MSP is out there looking out for them and that you are being able to make it to where they can continue to work. And then don't forget the essentials. Employee education is definitely a must, making sure we have that phishing training. Enforce policies for access to your systems, authentication, and then patch any of those critical bugs that are out there. So taking a look at those essentials that we have to do out there, I want to take a minute and just run through how can we help here at Sophos with these types of events. For the first one, we can help with the high quality defenses for your environment at all of your entry points, whether this is from your endpoint, server, firewall, email, web protection. We can automatically block threats before they make it into the environment. We can assist on the firewall side, making sure we do not have RDP protocols open to the outside. With the XDR tools, we can gain access and insight into those devices on your network to determine, is RDP still open in that environment? Same with our cloud optics tool. The ability to identify and mitigate vulnerabilities in your cloud environment and prevent exploitation, again, in your AWS Azure environments 365, that is where our cloud optics steps in. And then we do have our phishing training and awareness. We want to make sure we educate those end users. For the second one, hunting the potential threats that are out there, we actually do this in 2 different ways. We have our XDR tools, which can provide the data. We will be bringing in even more data, as we talked about earlier, with the SOC OS integration and Brain Trust, bringing in more components from other vendors. Today, you can already see us bringing in components from Office 365. XDR gives you the tools to be able to go in and do those investigations and those threat hunts on your own. If you do not have an experienced cybersecurity IT staff, someone who can go in, take a look at those indicators of compromise, determine between a benign and malicious threat, that's where we get into Sophos MTR. This is a 24/7 threat hunting detection and response with full remediation included. It's our Sophos managed threat response. We can also help harden the IT environments. Again, XDR is a great tool for this. I know a lot of you probably have RMM tools as well. RMM tools provide a wealth of information that you can utilize for this as well, but identifying outdated systems, unsupported systems, checking applications against the latest online vulnerability, identifying devices without best cybersecurity practices in place, pulling application information, patches, logs, and info from those devices. XDR is a great tool. Again, it is a tool, something that you have to utilize to pull this information. And lastly, we can help with your cybersecurity incident response plan. We do this again 2 different ways. If you are a Sophos managed threat response customer or partner, we have your 24/7 emergency response. Those guys are always sitting there 24/7, 365. Pick up the phone, reach out if there is an attack or anything that you see, or even if you detect anything suspicious on a network. You guys are using your computers all the time. If something doesn't seem quite right, even though we have all of our incident responders on there, bring additional information to them. And then lastly, Sophos rapid response. This is an emergency. This is the 911. This is for all organizations, whether you are a Sophos customer or not a Sophos customer. This is the ability to call, reach out to Sophos, get a rapid responder on the phone. This is a obviously paid for service. When we go in, we will analyze what happened inside of the environment. We will take action, we'll kick the bad guy out of that environment, and then assist with the remediation. And as we saw, all the data that was pulled from here over the course of the last year was from our rapid response team. Now, everything that we went over today, the playbook, the adversary here, you can get access to this. If you want to see this report, you want to have a copy of this report, go to news.sophos.com. Up in the search bar, type in active adversary. You'll find the adversary playbook from 2022, as well as the one from 2021. If you need more information on our incident response, go to sophos.com. You'll find our Sophos rapid response. You can get more details. You can also reach out to the Sophos team and they'll be happy to help. With that, I'll leave it for any questions that anyone has left.
All right, we got one. I don't know if you're going to know this, but just in case, do you know how many attacks were seen where Exchange proxy logon, proxy shell were used for initial access that used another tool for lateral movement and persistence?
So we don't have the data broken down to, so obviously we have the data broken down for the proxy shell. We saw that in, I believe, if I remember the number correctly, it was 48% of all the incidents was the initial entry point. Now, is we didn't pair that together. So once we saw them in there, we didn't pair that together with, of the proxy shell, this percentage of them used RDP, or this percentage used this amount. Again, RDP was utilized in 82% of the incidents that we responded to. So there's a very high likelihood that once they got into that environment utilizing proxy shell, they did utilize RDP to move laterally inside of the environment.
All right. And
Ooh, got a couple more questions.
Yeah, look at that. Questions are popping up. Stand by. Woo. All right, so we have, do you build relationships back to try and identify how the threat actor got into the environment in the first place?
Absolutely. So from both sides of it, from our Sophos MTR, as soon as an incident is detected, whether that's automated or by one of our threat hunters, one of the first things that they will do is neutralize what they can, and then they will start to build an investigation of where this came from. Same thing goes if you call in and you're not a Sophos customer, or you are just using our endpoint and you need our Sophos rapid response. Goal number one is to stop the bleeding. We want to get in and kick the bad guy out of there. We want to stop any of the current threats. And then they work back from there to try to figure out where this came in. That is a huge part. As we saw in the beginning there, we need to understand how the bad guy got into the environment. We want to understand that so that way we can present this to our customers and our partners to say, hey, these are the defenses you need to shore up. It came in off of a proxy login, or it came in off of that 1% with the external RDP. That needs to be shut down and taken care of. So yes, the root cause is always very important in any of these instances.
All right, and what do you think is going to be the evolution of tools used by attackers for lateral movement and persistence?
I think until we start to get a handle, again, we're seeing the rise in RDP for lateral movement. That was significantly up from 2020. I think it was a 40-some% in 2020, up to 82%. The bad guys are going to continue to use the tools that are working. They're not going to change what they're doing in the environment while those tools are still available. The same goes for PS exec. Unfortunately, it's a very popular tool. It's used amongst everywhere. bad guys know this. They are going to take advantage of it. If we stop utilizing PS exec and brand new tool, whatever input here, if that is a tool that can also be utilized by the attacker, they are going to shift and go that route as well. There's no way to know the future, but I would say RDP is still going to be a very big one. PowerShell is definitely going to play a very big part in everything. PowerShell is built right into Windows. So understanding how PowerShell is being used is where you're going to need to be looking
All
at.
right. And how effective do you think our pen tests are in avoiding bad actor entry?
Pen tests are great. We unfortunately do not do pen tests today. We may start doing those in the future, but I absolutely, if you've got an environment and you can, the customer will hear and agree to a pen test on the environment, it is a great thing to do. It shows, how exposed you are from the outside world for that particular customer. So yeah, I don't think they're as prevalent as they should be. They're oftentimes, especially when we're talking in the small business world, they're oftentimes way too costly, and they're not something that a small business is going to pay for.
All right. And I'm going to call out Daniel Hopping because he had asked a question. I asked him to elaborate, and I'm still waiting on that. But his question was, who would like to speak to Sophos about making our threat response planning better? And I know that the MTR team does work with our partners. So if you want to speak to that a little bit.
So we obviously won't write a plan for you. We can absolutely, part of the onboarding for our managed threat response is to take a look at the overall assessment of your environment, help you shore up our defenses. They do have scripts and things that they run across the entire environment. So if there's gaping holes that they may see in the environment that could allow an intruder to walk in, those are things that they will bring to your attention and give you the steps on how you need to remediate those inside of the environment. But as far as building out your entire incident plan, there's a lot more than just cybersecurity, obviously, when there is a breach in there. So we can help with our portion of it, and we're happy to provide all the context and information and everything else.
All right, Daniel, I hope that answered your question. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to send me a message, karen.guarino@sophos.com. I put it in the chat. But if you have any questions on that, just let me know. I'm here.
Very good. Any, Daniel, looks like Daniel responded. He said, this is what I need to hear. So perfect. Excellent information. As we all know, security is beyond the number one thing that we need to be focused. It's in all caps, it's in italics, it's in 72-point Cooper Black. I mean, it's the number one thing that we need to focus on. And some great information here. Hope everybody was able to learn some great information. And as Karen mentioned, she'll throw in the chat there her email address for anyone that wants some further information. And then Karen, we do have our giveaway here. It's the awesome Sophos backpack. And it was funny, I was as I was getting ready today, I was thinking about one of the swag things that I have. I actually have a Sophos t-shirt. I should have grabbed it, but it's something about carry on. And remember back, I mean, it's really, really old. It was back in the days when you guys purchased CyberRoam. So it dates back. How do you guys know how many years ago that was?
CyberRoam was
8 years ago, 8, 9. It was just before Reflection.
Yeah, right before Reflection, a little before I came on board. So yeah, I'd say 8, 9 is probably about right.
So that's an old t-shirt. I still wear it to this day. So it's a bit beat up, but so with that
what you're
being
saying is you need to get you some new t-shirts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll definitely hit you guys up at the next conference in the next few weeks here. So with that being said, Karen, do we have a winner for today's prize?
We do. Daniel Hopping, you are our winner.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Daniel Hopping, congratulations.
Yay.
Yeah, I will grab Daniel's contact information we have from registration and provide it to Karen so she can get that out to you guys.
Awesome.
With that being said, we're at the top of the hour. We had a full hour of great information here. Steve, Karen, thank you so much for your time and education today. For all the participants, thank you for being here today. You'll be receiving an email within the next 24 hours with a link to the replay of today's event, so you can pass it on to other people within your organization, and feel free to pass it on to other MSP colleagues out in the field too, sharing that information. It's one of the beautiful things about our IT channel is that we're all here to share and help each other out. So with that being said, everybody have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Take care.
you. Bye.